You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and here today, we're going to talk about on-site search. I've got a great friend, Charlie Hull. It's been part of the network for a while now. I've talked to him a few times when on-site search comes up, and here's why. Maybe it's a little bit of me search, but, when I jump out to a website, and I think a lot of people are here, and the on-site search is broken. It's one of the most frustrating things that's out there. And so that is kind of what we're going to tackle today is why is it so hard? What are the intricacies that go on behind the scenes that people have to be thinking about? Organization, team structure, data, what the future might look like in this space as well. But before we get started, Charlie, I'll kick it over to you. If you want to do, a brief intro on yourself and OpenSource Connections, that'd be great. And then we'll kind of jump into the conversation. Sound good?
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. Hi, everybody. My name's Charlie Hull. I've been in the search business about 20 years now. As you can probably tell by the accent, I'm based in the UK, but I worked all over the world. And OpenSource Connections, who I work for, our mission is to empower search teams. We have a mainly open source technology focus, but we help people build better search engines. And we do that using data-driven techniques. We do a lot of trading. We do a lot of really kind of passing the knowledge on to the people we work with. So eventually, maybe in a contradictory fashion, we're working ourselves out of a job. We want to make your search team better at what they do. I'm really excited to talk today.
Yeah. Awesome. Then what are the platforms that you're normally like working with? So everybody, this is not a platform for search, but basically enabling, is it like Solar, Elasticsearch? Yeah.
I mean, again, an open source focus. So Solar, Elasticsearch, the main ones. Also a new one, OpenSearch, which has come out of AWS, Amazon, which split off from Elasticsearch technically about a year ago. But to be honest, I mean, you sometimes see these things standalone, but you also see them inside other platforms such as SAP, Commerce Cloud, or Hybris, as it used to be called. Very often you'll find an e-commerce platform has an open source search engine somewhere buried within it. Welded into it, sometimes not so well. So you can't quite get to the things you need to get to, but open source platforms are pretty much the most common search platforms out there today.
Yeah. Awesome. So I do want to just tackle first, like, why is it so hard? Why it doesn't seem like it should be that hard, but it doesn't take long, I don't think, for anybody to break search on a website, and it happens over and over and over again. Would love to hear your thoughts on that. Why is it so hard?
Well, it's one of my special talents, to be honest. I can break most people's website search in about 5 minutes. I think I've just been doing this for way too long. Why is it hard? Well, there are kind of multiple reasons, really. And a few very simple examples. I mean, I was actually running an event in Paris last week, and one of the examples I gave, I asked the audience, did anybody out there know what a French press is? And I think one hand went up. So this is an audience in France where they drink a lot of coffee and they don't know what a French press is. And the reason is that's an American term for a cafetiere or kind of coffee pot, with the ones with a plunger. So it's a mismatch in language. And it's not just a mismatch in language where, nationally, I mean, obviously an American trying to buy a French press on a French, website. And I did try one of their very big supermarkets and it doesn't work. Will fail, but it's also down to the language between what your users call your products and what you call your products. So whatever's in your inventory, which ends up in your search engine index, if that's literally the wrong words, and your user comes to ask for something they know how to describe, and it's not how you've described it, you've got a problem. Search engines aren't intelligent. They're just basically just an index like at the back of a book, and if the wrong words are in the index, you're not going to be able to find the thing you're going to look for. And this is frustrating for users. And I think, you can always try a search, and literally if you can't find the thing you're looking for, if you get one of those dreaded 0 results pages, then you're going to think that the vendor doesn't carry that item. They may do. They may have just called it something differently. So that's one reason. I think one of the other reasons is I don't know really what you want when you come to search. I mean, if you type in glass cafetiere, for example, I'm going to show you pictures of cafetières you can buy, and actually maybe the glass is broken in your cafetiere, and you want to get some new glass for your cafetiere. That its search intent is really, really hard to figure out. It's not something that is obvious from the words you're typing in, especially as we're trained by Google to type in a couple of words and expect magic to happen behind the scenes. So that's another good reason why this stuff is hard. The other problem is I don't think generally we have good ways to measure how good search is. If I ask you to rate a set of search results according to the query you've put in, so again, I'm going to type in French press. How good are these results? Are they brilliant, actual French presses, cafetières? Are they kind of just a kind of coffee pot, so middling? Are they just ground coffee? And that's not what I was looking for, obviously. How do we decide which are good results and which are bad results? And I'll ask 100 different people, and I'll get 100 different answers. And even two experts in the field of selling coffee pots will give you different answers in terms of what are relevant and useful results. It's a very subjective thing, and that makes it very hard to measure search, and it's very hard to standardize on how to do it. And I think the last thing is, of course, most people hate the search engine. People within the organization, people with outside the organization, they see something broken. They think there's something wrong. Your boss is saying, why can't it show the products we want to sell? Your users are saying, I tried to search for this, I got nothing back. I know you sell these things. Why did I do this wrong? And then everyone else is saying, why can't you just make it like Google? And so I gently explain to people that without 1,000 people with PhDs and all the money in the world, that might be a bit of a challenge. And actually that web search and site search are two slightly different things. But there's multiple reasons. It is a very hard thing to get right, and that's part of the reason that's what our clients struggle with and what we try to help with.
Yeah, I mean, but I think a lot of everybody's been so busy trying to build out their tech stack over the past couple of years. It's been this time of people going and just finding, hey, I have a search platform? Yes. Do I have email? Do I have SMS? Oh, they're just plugging it in. And now we're at this time where, people are taking a lot more time, effort, introspective looks at their website, the performance of it. But search isn't the first thing that people go after, but it's one of the most frustrating things. But I think in their mind, they think one of these platforms, when they plug it in, should do it all for them. And so when you think about internally, whose fault is it that it's not working? It's nobody's fault. It's the platform's fault. And maybe we should switch platforms, which then nobody wants to do. So,
yeah, I mean, so it's a classic case, this, where, people have a search engine and there are problems with it. And they think by putting a new search engine in, it'll magically all get better.
Right.
So what you're doing there is you're moving to a brand new, unproven, untuned bit of technology, probably at high cost, because search migrations can take, years and cost a huge amount of money. You're moving to that new one, which is going to fix all your problems, but you're leaving behind the old one, which at least you had done some work, I hope, on tuning, and it's understood. So you're moving from an old tuned search engine to a new untuned search engine, and very often results are actually worse. So, this is the wrong way to approach it. I mean, the thing about search is, unlike a lot of other fields, it touches so many different other areas of the business. You've got the product data. If that's not clean, if that's not well organized, if it's not well tagged, it's going to be very hard for any search engine to sort it out and to index it and give a good search experience. You've got the user interface itself. If the search box, you can't find it, or it's not big enough, or the results display isn't intuitive, then it's very hard to give a good search experience. You've got your customer-facing people, the people who hear about what people actually want. Do they really understand or know what queries being typed in, what they tell you? Because sometimes the search queries can tell you a lot about what your customers actually want, as opposed to the things you're trying to sell them. And then you've got you have got the technical side of things, which does take some doing to get it right. But I think technical is just really one aspect. I mean, when we work with clients, we look at 7 different aspects of search maturity, we call it, and the technology is only really one of them. There's many other things you need to get right. And this leads on to a question about how a group of people working together can make search better. What is the search team? And very often we think of that as just those guys in the back room, actually working on the technology and on the platform. Whereas in reality, it's many other areas of the business that all dip their toes into search. And if they're not all working together collaboratively and properly, you're not going to make progress. You're just going to end up with this situation. Everyone hates the search engine. Just email a complaint to this guy in the back room, and it'll just stack up, and things will never get moved forward.
How often do you think then and I'm thinking of what, a lot of digital executives, listen to this podcast, and there's the key takeaways, because there's a lot of education going upwards right now, right? Because it's easy to look and see search isn't working and say, hey, get it fixed. And then you have the people that are running, the e-com departments and the digital and the direct consumer sites that are saying, well, it's not that simple. And like, well, just put in it, like we're saying, put in a new platform. But how often do you think it's the platform? And how often do you think it's the back-end data structure, having the right team, having the right people involved? Like, what's the percentage of time? Because what I don't want, if the key takeaway is, hey, 90% of the time you need to switch platforms, which I don't think is the case, that's one thing. But if it's not the case, then we need to make sure that people know, like, hey, step 1 is not scrapping the platform, right? Step 1 is actually, maybe an evaluation. Do you have a platform? And then step 2 is, okay, this is the data you need. And step 3 is the right team structure. Like, how do you think about that?
Well, I think the first thing to realize is, to be frank, most search engines are basically the same. I know search engine vendors won't like me saying that, but most search engines work the same way, have the same underlying principles. This technology has been around for a long time. Most modern search engines run on algorithms developed, 30 years ago. So let's put that aside for a minute. The first question I'd ask in that situation would really be, how are you measuring how good search is? And that's really on kind of, several aspects, how obviously speed is important, performance is important. You need to get your results back to users quickly, and not always easy when maybe you have to check stock levels and run out to some extra system to come back to show the results. You've got the relevance of the results. Are the results coming back actually relevant to the queries people are putting in? And then you've got the experience. Again, is it a good experience for the user when they use your search engine through some kind of UI? But actually, many of the clients we talk to, the first questions we ask is, how are you measuring search? How do you know if search results are good or bad? And in a lot of cases, they don't really know that at all. They haven't got any kind of system or process in place to measure search quality, and not least measuring search quality in terms of some of maybe what I call the search nerd metrics. The ways you can work out the placement of certain results and what magic number that gives you, but also the KPIs the search engine is meant to kind of be working to satisfy. So if what you care about is average order value, or conversions down to search, whatever these things are, and you're not really measuring that, and you're not that's not something the search team is kind of measured on, then you've got no accountability. So those first questions are, how are you measuring search? How are you just getting some metric of how good is search today? Obviously, eventually we want a magic dashboard that has a nice big green light most days saying search is great, and we know what it's doing for our business, what money it's generating for us. But starting off with just some very simple techniques to measure how good search is something that I think is the first step. Once you've got that measurement, then you can think about ways to fix it. And then it comes down to, what are the areas of the business that can improve things? Is it content quality? Is it tuning some parameters of the search engine itself? The platform may be the wrong platform, but let's put that aside for the minute. Is it how can we do things like boosting results? How can we move certain results up the list? Say that if there's a sale on, there's some kind of promotion, or it's Christmas, or it's Thanksgiving. So, but that first step of measurement is absolutely vital. And a lot of this is around, there's some simple techniques, but eventually we need maybe some data science to do some more advanced measurement.
So, I mean, is that like the typical engagement where I'm trying to make sure that I understand. So you would come in and take a look at first, what are the metrics? Are you even tracking anything? What are they? And then is it data? Like, is it misstructured data on the back end? Is that a player in it? Like,
it's one possibility, yes, because again, the search engine just takes whatever you give it. So if you've got a product catalog, you basically inject that into the search index. And data quality is hugely important. It's very much a garbage in, garbage out problem. I think, but that's just one of the potential causes. Often the search engine isn't configured as well as it could be. Again, when we have this situation where an e-commerce platform may have a search engine welded in not so well, and you can't really get at the settings, they've kind of been preset by the e-commerce platform, then you may need to kind of get in there and figure out if you've done the right things. Are you, for example, when you type in a 2-word phrase, do both those words have to match to give a result? Now, in a lot of cases, that's a good idea. But if you just say, well, either one or the other can match, then you get the classic, what I call it the red dress problem. I type in red dress, I get some red shoes, and I get some red trousers, and there's some red pants, and I get some red dresses, but I don't get the red dresses I'm looking for only. So that's kind of a settings problem. But also, when people are typing stuff in, what do you do with it? If someone types in a particular query, do you recognize it as a type of query? I'm looking for a type of thing. I'm looking for shoes of some kind. Therefore, I'm going to do a slightly different kind of search because shoes are shaped slightly differently to other items of clothing. Or if I'm typing in a part number, that's a very common one. How do I recognize it's the part number? Because that's an exact thing. I want that part. I don't want one that's 3 digits different because that's an entirely different thing. So there's various areas we can attack, but the very simple first step is take the top 50 queries by frequency that you get on your site, and you should be able to find those in your logs. They're just recorded. Sit down, some people, and say, right, for each of these 50 queries, let's do a search, look at the top 10 results, and let's just eyeball it and say, are these good? Are these bad? Are these terrible? What does this tell us? And that's the very start of a measurement methodology that's going to drive every other improvement, because everything you do should come back to say, have we made this picture better? Have we improved these results? Have we actually, driven some kind of measurable improvement? And without that feedback loop, you're really stuck. You're just going to be complaint driven, or you're just going to be operating in the dark and just poking things and hoping something gets better.
Who does that usually within the organization, though? Because search is one of those things that I know resides in e-com, but sometimes bounces around because so much is dependent on the data that's uploaded, the content that's there. How's it working? How's it integrated with the other parts of the company? Sometimes falls into IT. Like who owns? And I love what you're saying. Like it's literally simple, right? It's just, the first step is, get your top 50 queries and then go one by one and see if they're working or not. But who does that fall to?
Well, one of the absolutely key roles in this whole setup is some kind of search product owner, someone who owns search and helps the search team, satisfy these kind of KPIs and requirements the business is handing down. And again, this is often a role that's missing with an organization. You might have someone technical who kind of owns search, but they only own it without that kind of technical view. You might have an executive who maybe owns search under marketing or some department like that. But a search product owner, somebody who can act as the interface between the more technical side, the other parts of the company that drive search, and the business, and kind of is accountable for those KPIs is absolutely vital. And the whole structure of a search team is something we work with clients quite a lot on. There's a whole list of different roles, and in most companies you'll find some of these roles, 3 of them have been done by one overworked person. Some of these roles don't exist. There literally aren't people in those slots, or they've been outsourced, which has its pros and its cons. How much control do you have, and that analysis of the search team is really important, because then you can start building a team that's really effective, and it will draw people from all different areas of the business. They all need to understand something about search, and so there's an education gap there to be addressed. We've got to. Has anyone ever sat down to people in the content side, to people producing the product data, and told them what a search engine actually is and how it works? If you haven't done that, then how can they understand how to give you good data? How can they understand, for example, that keyword stuffing a field, putting lots of repetitive keywords in the field isn't actually a good thing? It may look like a good idea to them, but it's not good for search. So that search product owner is absolutely key. And then setting up the structure of the team around it. And then we're beginning to get closer to a situation where we've got an effective team tasked with this, improving this absolutely vital thing for a business, accountable to, KPIs for the business, able to understand what they're doing, and also to have that measurement capability to constantly iterate and gradually improve search. So none of this is about technology. It doesn't matter what platform you're on. It doesn't matter what products you've got. This is about methodology and process. And this is something that's sadly missing in a lot of cases.
What if you don't have the technology in the back end? Like, what is the evaluation process for that?
You mean if you've kind of
so this is what I've seen happen
to somebody else? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we see this. Obviously, not everyone will have their own in-house search platform or an e-commerce platform. They might have something that's hosted or a service-based model. You can still do some of the same things, but with anything, when you have a technology depend on this heavily, and bear in mind, if you can't find it, you can't buy it. So in e-commerce, good search is absolutely vital. You're going to have to make a decision about how much control you want or you need. If you're a small shop, then you're probably going to have some kind of hosted platform and outsource a lot of these decisions to other people and trust they know what they're doing. And they should be able to give you that control, and they should be able to give you the features you need. If you're serious about this stuff, if it really is something your business absolutely depends on, you're going to have more control of search. And that will influence the technology decision you have to make. I know that the biggest retailers, people like Home Depot in the US, Otto Group in Germany, these are multi-billion-dollar businesses, and they have their own search teams of something of the order of 50 to 100 people just doing search, because it is absolutely key that they have that control, and they cannot outsource those decisions to other people. So you're probably smaller than Home Depot, but if you're not just a small kind of mom and pop shop and somewhere in the middle, you're going to have to think about how much of this control you need and how much you depend on it, and what you want to be able to do. I think it's down to you can buy a car with the hood welded shut, and it'll drive perfectly well for a while and probably get where you need to go. But at some point, you're going to want to open that hood and do some work and fix something, or get an expert in to help fix it for you. And so it's a decision you have to take. Are you just going to trust the other people who've done a good job, or do you need to have your fingers in there and fixing it yourself? And that balance is a decision that every company needs to make. Obviously, on our side, we favour the open source route, because then not only do you have the technology, you can see how it's put together, you can modify it, and you can work collaboratively with many other companies to build better technology. But that route isn't for everyone. I think it's a decision for the individual company.
No. When we talk about, I want to go back to like the content and the data on the back end, because I think if you've never talked to those teams that are creating it, right, it's going to be infinitely harder to try to get it to work. But then what do those conversations look like? And it's interesting, because we just hit the past 2 years, 2.5 years, where we've been asked to create more content than ever before, right? Companies who had never had anything listed online all of a sudden have 2,000 items. And we have teams of people trying to just crank out the content, right? Yeah. The data that allow it to be listed and shown. And I would love to hear like how people are handling that piece.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The last few years have been astonishing in terms of the adoption, of e-commerce, often by companies who've never done it before. They had physical counters you went to, and suddenly, or they had paper catalogs, and suddenly they're having to get.
And they're typing in those catalogs.
Yeah.
And to your point, if that's not how people search for the product.
Well, the funny thing is, in a lot of B2B businesses, they love those catalogs, and a lot of the people actually doing the buying would happily go back to those days, or the days they could actually go to a local counter and talk to a human. Mm-hmm. But this is the modern world, and I think this rapid adoption is showing some flaws in that process of moving that product data onto a web shop. And a key example is description text. So you'll be buying, I don't know, a screwdriver, and a screwdriver is a Phillips screwdriver, certain size with a plastic handle, all those kind of just basic terms. And then there'll be a little half page of text describing the marvelousness of this screwdriver, how it can be used for doing this job, that job, whatever, how it's brilliant combined with a hammer. It's, and it's all very, it's a lovely story. And people will think, the more of that stuff they write, the better this screwdriver will do in search results. Now, the problem is that descriptive text often isn't very useful for search because it's talking about all kind of other things. If it starts talking about how good a screwdriver is with a hammer and a spanner, then it'll also come up in searches for hammers and spanners. So you've kind of broken search. So there's ways to structure content and ways to think about content that that have to be understood when you're building an e-commerce search application. But again, I don't think often people sat down with the people creating the content and help them understand that what they do is vital to search and it's vital to get it right. So one of the first steps we often do is do a data inventory, look at the data that's gone into the search engine, all the different fields, all the way it's structured, and just say, is this useful for search? Is this not? Is this something we can use in a better way? Maybe this field's all full of numbers. We maybe have to index that a different way to something that's just full of text. Maybe some of these fields are more important than the other. The title of a piece is probably important. The body text, not so important. The keywords. What are keywords? What do I mean by keywords? Often people think of keywords as this abstract thing, the tags, the manufacturer name, is that important? And in every business, it's a different situation. And it comes down to how are people searching in the first place? So look at your queries, figure out what language your users are using to find the things. You can figure out what they're looking for. And how is that going to hit this content? And how's that going to affect the ranking of search results? So that initial data analysis step is really important.
I was just thinking of all the conversations I'm having with people around this, where if you followed what's happened, a lot of them are just taking exactly what they uploaded to Amazon, 4 or 5 years ago. And if it worked there, right, then they port that over to Walmart or wherever else they're saying. And then they port that over to their direct to consumer site, because if it works in these spots, it's going to work the same for me.
Yes. Well,
fundamentally,
again,
the wheels just
Amazon search
fall
engine,
off.
Walmart search engine, your search engine are all different beasts, and they'll all behave slightly differently. And of course, you hand it off to a third party like that, you don't know what processing they're going to do with it, and they often will. Another very good example is marketplace sites. Something that a lot of people are moving into now. They're saying, hey, we built an e-commerce platform. Let's create a marketplace so other people can sell through us. And that'd be brilliant. The trouble is then you open yourselves up to lots of different people throwing content at you in all kind of different ways. And the structure all goes out the window and no one quite sticks to the rules. And then if you let consumers put up their thing, can you imagine how people describe stuff on eBay, for example? Sometimes, the way two people will describe one object on eBay, they're selling the same object, is radically different. And that again affects search quality. So, this is a very thorny area. It's very difficult. I think the other thing as well is translating the physical shopping experience into an online shopping experience is difficult. When you walk into a supermarket, for example, you've got a series of aisles. So someone's already pre-categorized stuff for you, and you've got items at different heights, and there's lots of science that's gone into where do you put things at eye level, or where do certain brands go? Some of them even pay to be at higher levels, I know. Does that work on a web search engine where you just walk in and you're presented with a search box? And what do I type in now? Well, what did I come in for? Did I come into vegetables? In the supermarket, you wander through and you're prompted and you've got a little journey to take, and you get to the end and maybe you grab some candy at the end or some batteries, I don't know. But on a website, you're just presented with this kind of blank sheet of paper. Where do I start? Now, you've got to be guided through this. You've got to be helped. And I think just taking the physical shopping experience or the catalog shopping experience and directly translating it to online, that's very difficult. And this is also reflected in the difficulties we see with search.
Yeah. I want to jump just into the platforms a little bit. We were chatting before, and then you brought it up at the beginning, as well about, basically OpenSearch, Amazon spinning off from Elasticsearch, was it? Would love to hear thoughts on what's going on in this space right now. Where is it going? And, would love to know. I think you also made like AI-driven stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating for me. I think I've been, looking at the search business for 20 years, and I've seen companies rise and fall. I've seen lots of trends come and go. And when open source search first, came up, I used to have to spend half my time talking to people and even telling them what open source was before we got into the search stuff. That's no longer the case, luckily. But a couple of years ago, the big open source search engines were, Apache Solr and Elasticsearch. And then basically, Elastic, the company behind Elasticsearch, had a bit of a fight with Amazon about the hosted Elasticsearch services. This blew up into a dispute over. Basically, it's a commercial dispute. They're competing over the same customers. But in response, they changed the license for Elasticsearch and made it not really open source anymore. It's open code, but it's not actually open source. You have limited rights about what you could do with it to stop Amazon doing what they were doing with it. So in response, Amazon forked the code. They literally took a copy of the code and called it OpenSearch, and that's perfectly allowed within the open source model. And theirs is completely open source. So we basically ended up going from 2 major search engines to 3. And now, what's interesting for me with this is Amazon, AWS. We know they're the big elephant in the room. They have huge resources. What are they going to do with OpenSearch? And I think it's been interesting to see what are they going to do with OpenSearch for e-commerce. Because there are some gaps in the market. We've got the Shopify's, we've got the platforms, but a fully fledged open source e-commerce search product doesn't really exist. When you take an open source search engine, you have to build things around it, or you have to buy a platform has it embedded. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And they're already showing signs of moving that area. And I think with Amazon's might behind it, we're going to see some very interesting developments for the next year or so. The other thing, of course, is the rise of vector search or neural search, which is this new technology. People often label this stuff as AI, and there's 20 or 30 companies all saying they now have magical vector neural search that understands everything automatically, and you don't need to do any work, and it'll give you higher performance, and it'll know the shape of things, what things look like. A lot of that's still in the kind of wild west territory for me. We'll see what pans out of that, but I know a lot of the big retailers are experimenting with these new areas. So I think it's a fascinating time in terms of the platforms available. And there's still also the debate, again, do you go with something commercial, an Algolia, or do you go with something open source to gain that control? So that's again comes back to the question of technology choices. But it, as I say, it's a fascinating time to be in the search world, and particularly the open source search world.
Yeah, if we look at the AWS, right? So we think about what Amazon does wherever they step in, right? So first e-commerce, then logistics, advertising now huge, cloud storage huge. Like, are they just gonna come in and do the same thing? Like, where do they end up here?
Well, I think there's 2 things here. One of the great things about the open source model is you can just download it and use it and never even talk to the people who wrote it, and you can adapt it. You can do what you like with it. It's freedom. Now that's the basic core thing about open source. It gives you freedom. Now obviously somebody's got to write that code in the first place, and I think for consumers and users of search technology, what Amazon is doing is great. It gives you some more choices, it gives you some more things they've worked on, it gives you more things you can just download and use. The other thing is, interestingly, because when they created OpenSearch, they did it in reaction to Elasticsearch changing their license. They chose a very permissive open source license, a true open source license. And they've even got other companies also working on the same code base. They're being very collaborative. What they're not doing is saying, here's this thing, we created it and we could totally control it. And I think that's a very interesting thing, a very new thing for Amazon, actually, and AWS. It's been talked about a lot in the trade press as the fact they're actually trying to do open source properly. And in the past, they haven't been quite so nice about it. So, yes, there's that possibility. Are they going to come and take over? But at the moment, the weather looks good. It looks like we're talking about a a truly open source, collaboratively built, freely available search engine that can be used for e-commerce. And as I say, it's fascinating to see where this goes. I mean, again, things may change, the world may change, but at the moment, I think it's a positive development. And again, I'm very interested to see where it goes. But yeah, it's open source, so you can download the software and do what you like with it. And I think it's a very solid option.
So what's the top advice you'd give for people that are just, I don't know, their eyes are opened on this episode around on-site search? And what's the first top 2 or 3 things that come to mind? And then the next thing would be, what gets you up in the morning? What gets you excited?
Well, I think the first thing, again, I'll come back to measuring search. You cannot improve something unless you can measure it. And, we promote a iterative, rapid way of improving search that absolutely depends on measurement. So the first thing to think about how you're going to measure search. And, we talk about this a lot. We run conferences like Haystack, and we have a very active blog and videos, all kind of this stuff tells you how to do this stuff. It's out there in the world. There are free tools, ways of, gathering these, what we call judgments in the search world, judgments of how relevant a result is. And you can do that either human powered, people literally just saying, this is good, this is good, this is bad, this is, or you can do it based on clicks, which is slightly, harder, but obviously at higher volume. So thinking about the measurement is absolutely key. I think that's the first thing. So read up about it, find out about how to do data-driven search improvement. There are books like Relevant Search tell you a lot about this as well. The next thing I think is to think about your team. Who owns search? Who is really responsible for search? And
I think in most cases it's just been delegated. There's nobody who actually owns it. Sometimes you have the person internally that wants to own the website, right? Wants to own the content, the marketing. Search is usually just delegated, and they may or may not, they own it, but do they?
This might be a new role, but I think also there's an issue of education here. Learn about how this stuff is done. Again, it's not rocket science. A lot of this is very, it's basic principles and process, but learn about how this stuff is done, learn about how it'll work, and it'll work better if you have a search team. That we're not talking about a bunch of people and they all do search, all day, every day. We're talking about thinking about all the people that search touches with the organization, representation from each of those areas. Even things like, can you leverage some of the expertise your customer-facing people have? Category managers are amazing. They know what you've got. They know what their customers are looking for. They know exactly what, a French engine manufacturer wants to buy. They're down to that level of detail, that specificity. They can tell you what are good, bad search results. They can also, if you have given them the right tools, they can fix some of those issues on an individual per query basis. And there's ways to do that. It's called search management. So bringing those people into bringing people under a team, a virtual team umbrella, and then having this idea of a search product owner, I think, to really lead that charge, be accountable, help deal with the interface between the search team and the business, and really begin to join these dots up. So search is, really you become what we call a relevance centered enterprise. You really think of search relevance as something absolutely key to driving your business. So that would be my, first couple of steps. But there's a lot of material out there now. There's a lot of freely available material from conferences, videos, blogs. There's training courses. There's books. There's a lot of ways to teach yourself search, and it's not all deep techie stuff. A lot of it is, more systems level. It's processes. It's ways of working. It's collaboration. So I think that's the first bit of advice I give to people. In terms of what gets me up in the morning, I think search is endlessly fascinating. It's something that's literally woven into everything we do online. You pick up your phone, you get Google Maps up, you look for some restaurant, you're using search. You talk to Alexa, you're using search. All of this stuff is being powered by search technology. I think that it's fascinating that we've not cracked it yet. And it's not easy.
So right. It's everywhere. It's literally everything. If I'm looking for an app on my phone, I pull down and I do search, right? Because I don't want to scroll through all the different apps. it's every part of our life now.
Yeah, it's in lots of places where it doesn't even look like a search engine, like a type something in the box search engine. It's no accident. Some of the biggest IT companies in the world, are basically search companies. They're the gatekeepers of information. I think so. That's what really keeps me going, and also it's a great culture, and the search community is a welcoming and fascinating group of people. We run a Slack group, Relevant Slack, that's got over 3,000 people across the world, all talking about making search better, which is fantastic. So I think the people really keep me going. I think also the fact there are still challenges to solve and fascinating new techniques to do it. The vector search revolution, I think, is coming. I'm not 100% convinced. I've been doing this long enough to be cynical about shiny new ways of doing things. And we still need to get those basics right. But I think there's fantastic opportunity to do things like image search, for example, or cross-lingual search, or really getting away from that idea that somehow we just have to have a keyword matching another keyword, and get more into kind of concepts and ideas, matching concepts and ideas. And there is, we're now getting the technical ability to do that using machine learning, using vectors. Which is fantastic. I think that shows great promise. But again, I'll temper it with a bit of cynicism, and let's try and again do this right and not get too distracted by new shiny things. So all that glitters is not gold.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah. It just the way you're talking about is I think is right. It's like we're on the cusp of AI being advanced enough to enable technologies that are there. And I'm glad there's a ton of companies out there, probably more than will end up making it, doing all the research. But yes, we're right at the cusp of, it's not quite been proven, but it's got indicators that it can work.
Yeah.
And so you jump all in. I don't know, where do you pick your horse? It's kind of gambling right now. But I think at the rate it's changing right now, I think within 18 months, we're going to see some real players pop up. And
yeah, absolutely. But it's still going to come back to these basic principles. So you've got to be able to measure search. You've got to be able to make changes. You've got to be able to measure the impact of those changes, both offline and online. You've got to have a strong team. And you've got to believe that this stuff is foundational to your business. And I mean, I'll tell you a quick horror story. There was a large company in the UK several years ago. I won't embarrass anyone who worked for them by mentioning their name. They're long gone. They collapsed due to some kind of private equity stuff I don't understand. But I went to see them, and I looked at some of the way their searches were behaving, and 30 to 40% of their searches were ending up in a 0 results page. And the page literally said, we don't have that. No links, no hints, no help, just we don't have that. It's simple. This was a major company. This is literally burning money. You're literally saying to 30 to 40% of your visitors, we don't have any of those things, whatever you just typed in. Goodbye, off you go. Go to Amazon, go somewhere else, go and buy it from, down the road. And these mistakes are still being made. And it isn't impossible to fix if you have the right methodology, the right process. And I think that's the challenge. Taking this stuff seriously, realizing how important search is as a driver of business. If you can't find it, you can't buy it. And also, if you don't understand what people are looking for, how do you know what to carry or new areas of business to get into? So I think that there's always challenges, and that's why I keep doing this stuff. I think it's a fascinating area to work in.
Yeah. I've been picking your brain for the past, 45 minutes or so. Anything top of mind that you want to throw my way that's top of mind for you? Or I want to give you the opportunity. I've just been asking you so many questions. I never kicked it back over to you.
Yeah, I think, this is for yourself, and I think for the wider, e-commerce community. I'm a search guy who came to e-commerce. It's a big area of focus for our company at the moment. We've got a dedicated team working on e-commerce. We've got, particular areas of our engagements focused on that area. We want to know what the problems are you're facing, and because we're clever search guys, but we don't maybe understand e-commerce anywhere near as well as you do. What are the challenges businesses are facing, and how can search help? and how can we, come up with better ways to help.
Well,
Again, our way of working is very collaborative. We want to learn as much from our clients as they learn from us. And again, through the forums we run, the conferences like Haystack, the relevant Slack groups, all the different ways we try and engage with the community out there. We want people to come to us with interesting and fascinating problems, and then we'll try and figure out how to help. So I think that's a call out to yourself and the wider e-commerce community.
yeah,
I'm always happy to talk about search. So come and bring us your problems.
Yeah, I think one of the top things right now is lifetime value of a customer. And it costs so much to get somebody onto your site right now. Delivering a poor experience, it's just not acceptable, right? That we can jump someplace else immediately. And so there's a lot focused right now on SEO, right? And that type of search to get organic traffic that's non-paid traffic because it's so expensive now. But once you've got them to the site, what is that experience? And again, to your point, it's literally burning money if they type in and it's a poor search result or it says 0 available or item not available. Yeah. It's all of it's flushed, and that they don't come back.
No,
right? It's like you go to
user loyalty, user retention. Yeah, absolutely. You've spent all that time, all that money. I mean, the amount of money people spend on SEO is astonishing. And then they get into your site, and that kind of, have you done any kind of internal search optimization to make their experience good? I mean, often, and again, that user retention, if you make them a loyal customer because you kind of understand what they want, and there's aspects here of both, good search, you've got personalization, you've got history, they've come from the Midwest and they're into, I don't know, mountain biking or whatever it is, give them a good experience. And you can do that with some of these technologies and make them feel valued. If you show them I'm sorry, we haven't got that item page, show them somewhere else to go. We don't carry those, but look, here's a similar brand. It's not quite the same, but we do this. But actually, hang on, really sorry, you haven't given us enough context. Can you tell us a bit more about what you're looking for? Is this for a mountain biking trip? Is it for a bike for your son? Then maybe we can zero in and help. Make it a conversation, make it a two-way process. Once you've got that loyal customer and they think, no, these guys are listening to me. They've invested enough in their technology and their processes to give me a good experience, then hopefully you'll retain them. Because as you said, people are fickle. And people will go where the experience is best. And if you paid all that money to get them there, if you'd spent all that time to get them to your site, make them a loyal customer, and you could have them for a long time, and they'll be a revisiting customer.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. Thanks so much, Charlie, for your time today. I think my key takeaway is you can't afford to not own your search, truly own the on-site search experience. You can't just rely on the platform that you have. You have to truly own it, because if not, then you're just setting money on fire. And so again, Charlie, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for being such a great friend, partner, supporter of the network. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Everybody take care. Thanks so much.